So, hello and welcome to the first episode of our Data Science in BioTech podcast. And today I'm joined by Bill, who is one of the founders of Involved Data. So, Involved Data are data science, informatics, and data infrastructure experts with ridiculously impressive careers spanning director, head, and VP level roles across companies like Ambrose Medicines, Jounce Therapeutics, Amgen, and Sana BioTech. And throughout today, we're going to cover a load of things like common challenges in data science and data management, how you can alleviate these struggles, good practice in and around building teams, and also some tips around looking for new jobs within the space. So, like I say, welcome, Bill. It's great to have you on. And to start, for those who haven't heard of Involved Data, would you be able to give a bit more of an intro into what you guys do?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Brad, for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast. Sure. Involved Data is a digital accelerator for life science. We are a premier consulting firm that solves digital and data challenges for pharma and biotech companies. Our team is built of, like you said, seasoned veterans who have a deep well of expertise in a number of different domains, including research and clinical data science, lab automation, robotics, and machine learning. So we partner with our clients to deliver high-impact technology solutions that allow them to move the needle in drug development. And I think what differentiates us from a lot of the other consulting firms out there is that we know both the wet lab and the dry lab. And so we can bring to bear solutions in the lab at scale that generate lots of high quality, important data that our customers can use in their machine learning models and other downstream data science activities. And that allows them to then bring new drugs to market both faster, but also in a high quality form.
Awesome. Nice. Awesome. Thank you for that. And I guess I can imagine that you guys see a lot of the same themes kind of cropping up time and time again doing this. So what would you say are the most common struggles for data scientists in biotech in the current market?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because it kind of depends on the phenotype of the data scientist and the environment that they're working in. You know, if we think about the folks that are in smaller biotech companies, especially the ones that are recently launched, there's typically a large startup cost for those data scientists. They're not only responsible for doing the data science activities or analytics, but they also typically own the infrastructure side and identifying different data sources they got to pull in. So it's quite interesting when you look at what they do, and this is common for a lot of small companies in general. If you ever work in a baby biotech, you find yourself doing a kind of whole host of different tasks that weren't really in your job description. So you have to be somewhat flexible. There was a recent Forbes article that said, data scientists in general spend, it's greater than almost 80% of their time doing non-data science tasks. There's a lot of time spent on, cleaning up the data, collating the data, building the infrastructure, doing different types of data wrangling tasks. So, it's good to go if you're going to pursue this field or as a career path, understand that you're going to get the opportunity to work in a number of different kind of related fields of your career in IT, what we call informatics, as well as different types of DevOps, which we can talk later about. So I think that's one of the biggest things. And I think for the other folks that are more mature settings, one of the big things that comes up time and time again is just having a lack of quality data sources, trying to find, whether it's in the public domain or even in the commercial available data sets, making sure that they are of high quality enough that they can be used in different machine learning models, as well as downstream data science activities that really serve the need and purpose that you're bringing them in for. And fortunately, a lot of those, especially in the public domain, are filled with junk. And so you kind of see garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, no, a lot of the kind of leaders and people I've spoken to say, especially that data quality is a big thing that everyone seems to come up against. So I guess the cost, the quality of the data, and the job actually not necessarily being as data science as people maybe expect coming out of education. But I, especially on that last point to do with the data quality, it seems to always be the kind of quantity versus quantity conundrum. And I guess where you get the big quantities of data, that probably ends up leading into some other challenges with data management and more on that sort of side. So is that something you guys have seen a fair bit of as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you think about some of the for me are tech bios in the space or data forward thinking companies like Recursion, for example. They've invested heavily in the infrastructure as well as the wet lab processes to generate quality data. So you have to think through really from the time that the experiment is designed, what types of associated technologies are you doing? For example, with cell imaging or different types of genomics, the outputs of those data sets, especially at scale, will get quite large and unwieldy quickly. And you need to have a good data strategy for thinking through how do you not only get that data up into the cloud, but also how do you process it through downstream pipelines in an effective manner that is not only performing well, but is also not breaking the bank from a cost perspective. There's a lot of nuance and kind of intelligence involved in thinking about how you use elastic compute efficiently, and then also how you structure your DevOps and other tooling so that you're not really running the meter unnecessarily. We've seen a lot of our clients and colleagues in the field over the years, especially since the advent of AWS's pretty strong cloud computing offerings, that when the meter's running, the bills come in are huge, right? So you want to really account for that and think about it up front, especially as you're starting off and building. If you're in a small biotech company with a greenfield situation, think about those things that come. What's around the next corner, as opposed to just building for now.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of kind of hidden costs outside of just the person in the seat doing the job that kind of come into it too. And I guess within the kind of data side of things as well, I've heard a lot of people talk about the kind of lack of consistency or maybe the structured data and actually being able to do much with it, and how that's kind of encompassed within data management. So is that another element that you guys see a fair bit of?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I put my informatics hat on, I've worked for a number of years in both research and clinical informatics. And, that was always the challenge, is trying to get good quality structured data, as well as getting the folks that are generating that data to be good citizens of the company and not only capture it, but capture in a way that has a solid surrounding set of metadata to describe the context of that experiment when it was done. And that's really critical for not only for the long-term use of that data set, but also to enable a lot of the machine learning and other downstream analytics in a way that is not kind of dependent upon humans. And that's somewhat changing, in the last year plus with the advent of the different GPTs and LLMs. We're starting to see a new, set of possibilities of what we can do with unstructured data. But for the most part, we still see structured data challenges, like you mentioned, are pretty commonplace. Especially, it's frustrating because a lot of the technologies that solve these challenges have been out there for quite some time. And it's more about the data governance and getting support from management at these companies to kind of instill a culture of data, so that the companies, the scientists understand that it's not just their job to generate said data, but also to make sure it's captured into either a LIMS system or a notebook, et cetera, with the associated and appropriate metadata, so that, down the road, when you're going to file your IND for your drug, it's pretty easy to compile all that information. Or if you want to do downstream meta-analyses or other activities that build upon previous work, you need that context.
No, 100%. So I guess to summarize on that sort of part, so in terms of those large startup costs, the data quality and the kind of challenges in and around the data management, I guess the main things are having that kind of unified team goal with the collaboration between the dry and the wet lab, which kind of comes into that overall culture of having a data-centric or a data-focused organization, as well as kind of MLOps function to really help solve that from day one, and the data governance. And I guess it's just, if you're going to spend all that time and money generating that data, why not take the time to strengthen the processes of using it in the first place?
That's well said. Absolutely. I mean, you want to make sure that, like you said, you have a culture of data, and that people understand the importance of both not only the quality of the data, but also making sure how it's going to be used long term. And that's typically, it's changing, but it historically has been an afterthought, unfortunately. And so, we're part of the services that we provide is to work with clients to help them understand, do some education, as well as to kind of do the messaging that's required both from a bottom-up perspective, but also top-down, so that the organization understands the value and how to unlock that value over time.
Awesome. And I guess a big part of this and having teams that can, I guess, take on these challenges and really bring everything together is the kind of skill set that across the team needs to be covered. So have you seen any specific skill sets that you think are maybe harder to find or maybe more sought after in these kind of data science teams?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's funny because my business partner, Matt, and I joke all the time that, especially for small biotechs, you're trying to hire unicorns. You're trying to find people that kind of know a little bit of everything or are experts in many different areas. And so it's hard, it's very hard. As organizations get bigger and you can have a bit more of a spreading of the skills and demand on those skills, it becomes a little easier. But if I had to think about kind of the basics, the key things beyond just data science and associated fields of study, I think DevOps, as we talked about earlier, is pretty important. At least being cloud fluent to some basic level, and we're seeing a lot of recent graduates and also folks coming out of postdoc. Those professionals, they kind of learned a lot of these skills along the way, just as part of the cost of doing business in school, which is great, right? Kind of they grew up in the cloud. They expect the data to be in the cloud, which is different than folks from my generation who, we had on-prem data centers, et cetera. So having that cloud fluency is important. Whether it's AWS or some other cloud service, you want to be able to get in there, kind of stand up different compute and storage, connect it, and do that in a relative secure way. I think once you get beyond the basics, that's when you need the pros to come in and kind of advise you on different architectures. And I think, AWS and other companies, they've realized this and they've put out some blueprints and other playbooks for how biotech and life science firms can build this infrastructure and not have to do it all kind of de novo. Beyond that, I think, there's other skill sets that are more soft skills that are important. Thinking about how to work in cross-functional teams, it's quite often that data scientists, as well as the folks in digital and data, other functions, informatics, for example, you're working as part of a team, either supporting a therapeutic program or maybe as part of a platform team. And so you have to be able to work in that team environment, be able to interact and kind of understand the needs, anticipate what's coming, ask the right questions. It's not that you have to be an extrovert, but you've got to be able to kind of understand the basic business set of skills to function within a team. So if you come out of a school or a previous experience where you've got that team experience, that's a really valuable skill set that makes you marketable and stand out amongst your peers. And I think the last thing I would add in terms of, this is kind of expected these days, but it's probably worth saying is that if you're going to go to data science in pharma or biotech, you got to know the life sciences side as well as the computational sciences. So whether that's a background in biology, chemistry, or one of the subdisciplines of those worlds, you got to really know the science, so to speak. So you can speak that language of the science, you can understand and again anticipate the different types of data types that are coming out, and then also what types of analyses need to be done. And so it's really important to be able to speak both languages.
100%. And to be fair, that last part about the kind of understanding the kind of science underlying it, so you can actually be more effective with your time in the data, is something that comes up quite a lot that I see on my side when speaking with kind of hiring teams. And I think the thing you touched on to start with as well, that kind of unicorn skill set, is something we've seen a lot of, especially over the last couple of years. And I think that brings a lot of challenges with hiring when we're looking for people to have all these 10 different skills and then kind of trying to build a team based on these absolute unicorns, because you might find one, but are there more out there? And I guess there's probably a lot more challenges within hiring those data scientists outside of that. Are there any other kind of challenges that you've kind of seen cropping up here and there in the sort of work you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, with some of the things we've already talked about, right? In terms of data management challenges and the need for other skill sets. Like you said, it's tough to find someone who can do all of those things. And so you quite often have to prioritize and triage what are the key and critical skill sets that that person must have as a candidate. I think the other thing is just making sure they understand, the state of the business, the company that's doing the hiring, that state of the company, what does it really need, as opposed to what they think they need, and what they need is not always the same. And that's where having a seasoned veteran kind of doing an assessment, identifying gaps, can help drive the right hiring and the right individual for that slot, as opposed to thinking that you need something, hire somebody for a certain need, and that goes away. That can be extremely frustrating both for the company and the individual. And I think, other than that, those are kind of the things that we see as the biggest challenges. I mean, to be honest, the market is still pretty competitive, as you probably see. Finding good people there's still a lot of jobs to be filled, and the folks that are really talented, they get picked up pretty quickly.
No, for sure. That summarizes the market really well at the moment, I'd say. And one thing that we've definitely seen on the tech side, for the tech part of our business is definitely seen, is over the course of the last however many years, like tech as a whole has become a lot less credentialist. I was wondering, a bit of an oddball question, but do you think biotech and biopharma will go in that direction and become less credentialist like tech?
We hope so. To be quite honest, pharma and biotech typically are laggards behind the tech industry in a variety of ways. And to date, it's still been fairly credentialed, especially in terms of looking for certain types of schools, the pedigree of those schools, having a PhD, what lab you postdoc in, et cetera. Are you published? Those things are important, but to be quite honest, in the world that we work in, they're not always everything. Having, especially for junior roles, having really good technical people that can learn, that the ability to learn is probably the most important thing. To your previous question, that's maybe one I would add, and that's hard to interview for, to be quite honest. But can you learn? Can you learn pretty quickly? Can you figure out, a new technology, how to implement it? And there's great online resources. I mean, I think we're kind of in the middle of a renaissance of education. And it's probably, to be honest, quite needed because of the cost of, undergraduate school and graduate school is so expensive. But, with all of the online school offerings, the different certification programs, the advent, again, of using LLMs to kind of get expert advice and knowledge really quickly, kind of shortcuts a lot of the, what we would go to school for. And, to be quite honest, if I can get someone who's, fresh out of school, who can learn quickly but doesn't have the immediate skill sets, I put them in a junior role and train them up, because, we can kind of mold them into the type of individual and team member that we need, as opposed to hiring someone that's, getting out of a postdoc. They're going to have certain expectations about the work environment, compensation, et cetera. And that's not always a fit or needed. Sometimes it is. And, we typically still see that in the machine learning areas and other specific types of scientific roles. But to be honest, for DevOps, informatics, other digital roles, you can do a lot just being, technology savvy. And I'm hoping that over time, especially for like IT skill sets, that there's more of an apprentice model, because there's a lot of folks who don't need to go to college, take on all of that debt. If they could somehow do like learning on the job, some type of job training, in place of, a 4-year degree for IT and some of these other skill sets we're talking about, that would serve them well.
Yeah, no, 100%. And to be fair, I have seen a few different apprenticeships going on, but it always seems the apprenticeship is you've got to have at least a degree in the first place, or a master's, or even in some cases a PhD, and then the apprenticeship the other side. Whereas actually, like you're saying, with the kind of now's the time with all these LLMs and like the GPT models. Actually, do we need to get that in the first place, or can we get somebody in and teach them the ways of the kind of new ways of working and get them up to speed a lot quicker without the kind of all the credentials underneath.
I think so. I mean, if you look at, and so I'm in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts has a Mass Bio, which is a kind of a organization that supports the pharma industry in Massachusetts, and they've put together a couple of programs designed to take both folks starting a career as well as people that maybe want to do a reboot in a career, gives them a path for how to, I think it's in both CMC and the clinical operations fields, get started into entry-level roles, and they'll help them get the training and then partner up with, it's basically a sponsor company pays for their training. But at the end of the day, they make a commitment to work for that company for a period of time. I think that's a great concept, right? Why not flex that for the technology industry? And again, give people who maybe don't have, college is not an option, right? So how can you give them options to really rethink the process and then get new people into the workplace that maybe didn't even know that this was a career path? I think that would be fantastic.
No, 100%. I think that's an awesome opportunity, and hopefully we do see more of those sort of opportunities pop up on the on this sort of side of things. And I guess from a candidate's viewpoint, to flip it to the other side, like we've touched on a few things, like obviously that kind of unicorn skill set, that kind of the element of being a quick learner, or like one thing that comes up a lot on myself when I'm talking to hiring managers, so that they really want collaborative people who can work well with the wider team and kind of the kind of wet lab team, which is something we touched on earlier, is like a bit of a challenge. But like, it's really difficult to then put that on your resume and then stand out from the crowd. So I guess from a candidate's viewpoint, what can they be doing to really help them kind of cut through the noise and get that foot in the door and find themselves a new opportunity, whether it be straight out of school or even like kind of looking for a next opportunity down the line?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's tough to relay your soft skills through a resume, right? And there's a lot of advice out there how to do that. But I think the best thing you can do pre-interview is just talk about some of the opportunities or projects that you've been able to show that you can work within a team. I think if I plug, my alma mater where I went to undergrad, which was WPI, they have a real team-based curriculum. So when you come out of school, you've already worked in your junior year and senior year in different teams to structure that as kind of the equivalent of a senior thesis. So if you have that opportunity in school, you should definitely put that on the resume. When you go for the interview, talk about those stories. Share those stories about how you're able to collaborate, how you're able to work with other folks, as well as listening skills are really important. I think especially these days, especially when I listen to podcasts, you can tell the other person's not really listening. They're just waiting for the next pause to talk. So if you're in an interview, good listening skills are important. You don't want to be too quiet, but listening to what the person's saying and then relaying that back so that they understand that you understand what they're saying and you heard them. I think that's important as well. We talked about the technical skills in the unicorn. I won't kind of recant that. But I think the other thing you can do, especially in the field of data science and in these technical fields in general, is there's great opportunities to showcase your work. I interviewed a candidate once, and he had a great not only website, but he shared his Git repo with previous work and projects and code, and kind of his analyses, just doing some fun, answering questions through data science. And that shows a lot. That just shows, number one, you're curious, right? And you really love this stuff. And number two, you've got the technical chops to answer these questions using statistics and other tooling. And most of the time it's open source, which is great. The open source tooling has come a long way. But then you can go look through the code, right? So that's a great way for a hiring manager to say, is this person really know what they're talking about? And if they do, once you bring them in, you can then talk about those projects, and it gives you something way beyond what you can take out of a resume. So I think those are a few kind of tips that if you're looking for a job, think about doing those things. And then try to show those in a quantifiable manner. If you've done, let's say you built a tool that has a operational efficiency benefit in terms of some value for whoever uses that tool, saves time, show those types of quantifications. If you work somewhere else and you save the company money by doing something, or you're able to, enable decision making, write those things out. Those examples go a long way to impress upon the people hiring you that you're going to not only work well in this team, but also move the needle for them to get, drugs to market.
100%. No, I think especially the quantifiable bit there really resonates. That's something I'm a big fan of when speaking with candidates. But I guess the whole kind of point that you kind of discussed there is really a case of like, show how you've done it. Don't just say I've done it. It's a case of show how, whether it be through a GitHub repo to show how passionate you are and that you love problem solving and coming up with new ways, or you're showing quantifiable elements, or you're showing how you collaborated with the wider team, rather than just say you did it, actually show how. And that is actually quite a differentiating factor to what a lot of other people are doing at the moment.
You're right. Absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for coming on here, Bill. I mean, this has been absolutely fantastic. And like I say, a massive thank you for your time and your insight. And if anybody would like to know more about any of the topics we've discussed today, or anything really, I'd say connect with either or both of us, and we'd be more than happy to chat through further. But yeah, thank you again, Bill, and have a great day.
Thanks, Brad, for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Hope to learn more in the future.